You may have noticed a delay between the time the start button was pressed and the moment the scene was loaded. This delay is due to the time it takes to load the scene. The larger and more complex the scene, the longer the load time will be. To avoid player confusion, let's add a load screen. Instead of creating a scene for a loading screen, I'm going to just create another panel in this scene. First, let's rename the current panel to Title Panel, and then collapse that panel and toggle it off for now. Next, right-click on the canvas and choose UI Panel. Let's rename this to Load Panel. I could add a graphic or animation to represent the act of loading, but I'll keep it simple and just add some text. Right-click on the Load panel and select UI Text. Set the text to Loading with a font size of 26. When I press Run Now, I see the Load panel. Let's go back and toggle the Title panel back on. I need to leave the Load panel on as well so we can find the object through code when the script begins. Back in the code, we just need to turn off the Load panel when the script begins and toggle both panels again when the Start button is pressed. First, let's create a private property to store the Load panel before we turn it off. It's okay to set the type as GameObject since a panel is a GameObject, and I'll name it Load Panel. In the Start method, I'll give Load Panel a value by setting it equal to GameObject.find Load Panel. Find is a static method, meaning we can call it from the GameObject class without having an instance of a GameObject. The find method simply searches through the current scene and returns the GameObject with the specified name. Now that we have a reference to the Load Panel object, we can go ahead and toggle it off. We use the setActive method to turn on or off a GameObject. We'll set it to false to turn it off so that it will not be visible when the splash scene begins. And when the button is pressed, before the scene is loaded, we'll use setActive to set it back to true. We also need the Title panel to disappear when the button is pressed. I'll add another private class variable of type GameObject and name it Title Panel. In the Start method, I'll set its value, using the find method, to the Title Panel GameObject. And in the Load Scene method, I'll use setActive to toggle the Title panel off. Finally, I'll comment out the line of code that loads Scene 1 so that I will be able to see this work before the new scene opens up. If I run this now and press Start, the Title panel disappears and the Load panel appears. Let's go back and comment the code back in for loading the scene. Save and run it again, and press the Start button. You should see the load screen appear for a moment before Scene 1 appears. Of course, it will be there for a longer period if it took longer to load the scene. You could add a load screen in each of your scenes to be used as the player moves from one scene to another.